Alright, so I played a game recently called the Snoot game. Amazing name, I know. So this is gonna be a long one. First of all, I think it's good. At least good enough to recommend, especially since it is free. However, there are a lot of glaring issues and there is a certain history which sours the enjoyment. Either way, an interesting experience. What is it about? Volcano High, the very unique school in the Caldera Bluffs, attended almost exclusively by dinosaurs. Anyone is welcome, and anyone can have a second chance here. Enter Anon, the dweeby loser who got bullied out of his last school. Perhaps this time it will be different. Perhaps this time life will change. The premise is fairly basic. I couldn't think of a better way to hype this up. It's a dating sim about dating an anthropomorphic pterosaur. What did I enjoy? Probably the humor. It definitely took a while to get used to it, but I eventually warmed up to the style of it. There's a lot of this angsty 4chan shitposter approach to it, which is definitely gonna turn a lot of people off. It also makes it difficult to treat the game seriously, which is probably the point. However, the problem is that it actually does tackle some serious issues, but without really making light of them, I think. I get the impression, at least. A strange approach to writing. I also enjoyed the ending. I've deliberately used tips and picked whatever was needed for ending 4, as in the best one. In it, I won't spoil it, but there is a fairly short scene where everyone comes together after graduating Volcano High, and I just always enjoyed this sort of moments. Mildly amusing, but mostly bittersweet. Considering the start, it's a surprisingly mature moment. There are also parts which I wouldn't necessarily praise as standout features, but I also thought that they were fairly good, such as the story. Whoever wrote this can tell a fairly simple but well done story. The characters have clear defined roles and individuality. The start is rocky, like I have said, but I believe this is a deliberate design choice. A bullied loser starts upset at everyone and everything, hates others but most importantly himself, proceeds to fall upwards into the life of friendship and love, changing the way they look at the world, eventually becoming more confident and open. It is inspirational for sure. Actually, there might be a few parallels there. It's just that it's clumsy and the 4chan language isn't exactly the most lovable characteristic. This is also a negative, now when I think about it. Speaking of, I struggle to point out the specific negatives. Like I have said, it's amateur. I can nitpick the art. I can complain about repetitive and somewhat lazy music. I could complain how mean and manipulative the characters are. I can say a bunch of critical comments, but at the end of the day this was slapped together by people who were not professional developers. Nor did they have a lot of time. I just can't have a huge amount of expectations here. It's a labor of love, or hate now when I think about it, and the result isn't even commercially available. It's just a free download from their site, and there aren't too many free games with a story this good I could recommend. Actually, funny thing, people love to praise Warframe's story, and it's obviously not the same as this, but I just want to compare the two and say that I enjoyed Snoot Game's story infinitely more than Warframe. So, it's out of the way. Now I have to talk about the elephants in the room, for there are several. I've already mentioned that Goodbye Volcano High exists, and this is a fun game of it. Though probably not anti-fan. It's not affiliated in any way with the original developer. It uses the same locations, same characters, same designs, but makes its own world and the story. The original creator, Co-op, publicly denounced this game and considers it an insult. If I'm perfectly honest here, the entire game feels like an insult to me too. It's as if the entire thing was motivated purely by spite and the desire to rile up Co-op. Occasional comments, certain characteristics, the approach to some events. However, it's not just that. Snoot Game definitely became more than an outrage bait, and I believe it can stand on its own as well. And while the insulting nature never really went away, I believe that Caveman Anon tried to create something of their own and succeeded, regardless of what their motivations were. Also, I'm a little bit sick, so bear with me. The thing which I saw repeated many times on multiple sites when it comes to Snoot Game and Goodbye Volcano High is the gender of Fang. Enter elephant in room number 2. Co-op created the character and made them non-binary. Sibling, as Nazar would say. I have to admit, gender identity is a touchy subject with a lot of people, and I'm on the boomer side of this. Meaning, I don't believe there is such a thing. Hate me all you want. However, I also believe that nobody has any right to ridicule people who consider themselves non-binary. If they are entitled to anything, then it's their own identity, whatever my or anyone else's opinion on this might be. Now, in Goodbye Volcano High, Fang is non-binary. In Snoot game, Fang is presented as non-binary, however, not actually believing that. Instead, it's a cry for attention, which later is an embarrassing moment from her youth. This, I believe, is what co-op considers especially insulting. I believe that Snoot game is free to present Fang as whatever caveman wants. Again, this being their own creation based on co-op original concept. I could bring up DC Comics, for example, and point out how there are plenty of characters who were written in early years, but in the more recent ones they were written differently. Gay, trans, non-binary, whatever, I don't know everything. I just remember what Superboy was gay in a couple of storylines well straight before that. What one of the adopted kids of Batman was written in a similar way, yada yada yada. There are definitely examples out there if anyone is willing to look. I don't truly care enough to do it myself. It's just a comparison. Just as anyone can make a different story with the same characters, and I think anyone would agree that characters in Snoot game are completely different. Trish isn't interested in bugs, and also a manipulative bitch. Reed is just a druggie and doesn't play D&D. Rosa is Hispanic and has serious anger issues. The band dynamic is completely different. Everything is different. Snoot game is just not Goodbye Volcano High. And to bring back my original point, Fang is different. This isn't the original Fang. This isn't Fatima or Faye or whatever. It's a different take, and it doesn't mean that it doesn't have a right to exist. My personal problem is the little line I saw every single time on the pages talking about Snoot game, which is that Fang is convinced by the player that she is female. That's the claim. As if she didn't have a mind of her own. I never got this impression. Instead, Fang was presented as a kid with, I suppose, a problem of finding her own identity. I'm sure everyone goes through this at one point during their adolescence, or hell, maybe even adulthood. There are plenty of embarrassing weeb memories for me, for example. So, in Snoot game, once Fang starts dating Anon, she is confident enough to accept herself. It's not a question of being cured of the evils of non-binary woke snowflakes. Instead, it's her throwing away the label and instead sticking with what she truly believes. If in the Snoot story Fang was non-binary, then Fang would have stuck to this. But instead, Fang is female in Snoot game. A woman who just couldn't find herself, and not just a dumb girl who is confused and needed a big strong man to tell her what is right or wrong. Again, this is not Volcano High. This isn't Snoot game, its own story. But hey, this is just my opinion. And I might as well talk about I've only hugged with Gator here too. So the story is essentially identical to Snoot game. The same setup, the same kind of characteristics, the same, just same. There are obvious differences and a lot more care and effort put in, but these are definitely two peas in a pod. Also, I believe that absolutely everyone in Vani is written much better. You don't have Trish and Naomi just being manipulative and evil. I mean, sure, Mia kinda fits, but she felt a lot more realistic, I suppose. Don't have a good word to describe the exact difference. I definitely knew a few people like her. I just don't think I knew anyone like Trish or Naomi from Snoot game. They were just written too much like caricatures with cartoon evil. Reed was also an extremely lazy, typical stoner, while Damien is a lovable goof. The list goes on. Vani is essentially an evolved version of Snoot game, and I believe it's just so much better. I don't think I will ever forget Olivia. The way she made me feel, nothing quite compares. So I just can't wait for whatever else these people have in store, if this is how fast they improve. Oh, and there are no cool cinematics in Snoot. Major disappointment.